some of the very mechanisms that make us human are the same mechanisms that make us religious. The attachment system. This is part of basic mammalian biology. We're mammals, we're primates. And that attachment system probably showed up, at least in primates, 35, 40 million years ago. And it's the basic caretaking system, the basic attachment system between parent and child, child and parent, that attachment system. And the attachment system is utilized in religions. We attach to a parent-like figure. And we've actually got a nice demonstration of it in Pentecostal worshipers. If everybody thinks about what a 2-year-old does, what does a 2-year-old do when he or she is distressed? That 2-year-old comes up to you as an adult or parent, an attachment figure, stretches out its arm and asks to be picked up. Look at a Pentecostal worship service. What do? It's the same gesture of a child in distress reaching up to an attachment figure. So decoupled cognition, attachment system, agency detection. We have hyperactive agency detection mechanisms. We will easily mistake a shadow for a burglar. We'll never mistake a burglar for a shadow. And we overread agency. We overread particularly human agency. This was discovered in the 1940s when people showed sort of dots moving on a screen with triangles, and we start thinking of them as agents chasing each other. We have these hyperactive agency detection mechanisms. Well, gods are agents. They're intentional agents. And so it's very easy for us to hook into that. Decoupled cognition, attachment system, agency detection, moral inferential systems. Now, if you go back to that illustration that I gave with vision, where you put together a complex picture and you're completely unconscious of all the mechanisms, the color detection systems, the motion detection systems, all those adaptations that create the seamless sense of vision. Well, that same thing applies to morality. We have innate moral inferential systems, and we're not conscious of them. They just, we can instantly know the difference between right and wrong, and we can come up with some rationalizations afterwards.
Why do you think it is that people grasp on to religion so strongly? Because let me phrase the question a slightly different way. As a child, a lot of the needs that one has, or a lot of the things that one is told, such as Father Christmas or fairies, for example, are things that are discarded relatively early on. Religion seems to persist into adult life and throughout the entirety of some people's lives. Why is it that religion has a greater grasp in that regard than other characters, perhaps, who could fit the religious model almost as well, like Father Christmas, like fairies, like other supernatural entities?
I think that's one of the most pressing questions of our time. In other words, what are the mechanisms that make religion so powerful? As I said, I think we're on the threshold of a comprehensive science, but we're not there yet, and that's one of the questions. What are the things that make religion so much more powerful? And I think if, for instance, we continued to tell our children that Santa Claus was real and that we went through costly rituals once a year, I think a lot of children would grow up saying, well, maybe he is. And so some of it is what's communicated to the child. If adults persist in the belief, if adults go through costly rituals, costly commitment mechanisms, I think children are going to go ahead and accept the beliefs. I think if you have an entire culture that is persisting in the belief, that's very powerful. And it again utilizes mechanisms that are by their very nature powerful. The attachment system is one of the most powerful mechanisms we have.
Another that you refer to in your book is the ritual, and certainly we see that strongly with a lot of religious groups. Talk us through the psychology of the ritual attachment.
Well, I think what rituals do is, again, they harness adaptations that, again, were originally designed for other purposes. And particularly they harness neurochemicals in our brain that are involved in a number of things. Religious rituals boost serotonin. That's involved in self-esteem, outward focus. They boost dopamine, which is involved in salience, marking things as important. They boost oxytocin, which is, as most people now know, is a trust hormone. And religion means, it comes from the root word religare, which means to bind together. And one of the purposes of religion is to bind groups of people together, and it does it particularly through rituals. And I think the beliefs form the core around which the ritual is based, but it's particularly those religious rituals that involve music. Music's very powerful. Coordinated action, group activity, touch. They turn on neurotransmitters that bind us to the people that we are around.
We see religion doing that, but where's the evolutionary basis of this ritual or enjoyment of ritual? Where does that fit in?
Well, again, I think it utilizes mechanisms that originally evolved for other purposes. And if we just take a look at ritual, the pieces of ritual, all right, if it harnesses serotonin, serotonin is one of the oldest neurotransmitters. It has multiple functions. It's involved in what people call the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproductive behavior. Serotonin is an
You're
old
very
neurotransmitter.
polite about the 4th F.
Absolutely. It's involved in numerous functions. But religious rituals, the physical activity boosts serotonin. It impacts, for instance, self-esteem, our sense of self. And religion, dopamine. Dopamine is involved, it is again involved in a lot of adaptations, but it's particularly crucial to the adaptations that had to do with marking things that are important. When you mark something that's important, that's a dopamine activity in your brain. When you remember something, that's a dopamine activity. So rituals create heightened sense of importance and intense memory. Religious rituals use music. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether music itself is a byproduct or music is an adaptation in and of itself. Darwin thought music was a sexually selected trait, a courtship trait. Whatever you think about music, music probably didn't originally evolve for religion, but it was quickly used by religion. And the studies show that music is one of the most important things that enhance religious commitment. So again, religious ritual itself is not an adaptation. Religious ritual utilizes adaptations that were originally designed for other purposes.
Just going back very briefly, for a cheap joke, if music was intended for some courtship ritual, being tone deaf explains why I'm not that successful. Can we just go back?
I know the feeling. I can't carry a tune.
Can we just go back to something that you mentioned, and I said was worthy of talking about that topic of itself, because it's one that does particularly irritate me when I hear this argument being advanced by the theists. How can you have morality without God? Now, I could talk for a long time about this, but you're the expert. What's your explanation or answer to that criticism?
It's that religion utilizes a crucial aspect of morality. And that aspect is that our moral inferential systems are mostly unconscious, they're automatic, they're emotional. We have a gut feeling as to why something's right or wrong, but we can't really explain it very easily. And so religions walk into that vacuum in our conscious awareness. And it's very easy for them to say, well, if it weren't for religion, you wouldn't have morality, because we can't be conscious of our moral inferential systems, just like you can't be conscious of the mechanisms that are the individual mechanisms that are going to come together to produce vision, unless, for instance, you may have a defect in one, like color blindness. Well, then you're aware of one particular adaptation that is misfiring. But, you know, we're not aware of the complicated adaptations that give us that sense of vision. It's the same thing. We're not aware of the mechanisms, the automatic, unconscious mechanisms that give us our moral sense. And that our morality is innate and just part of the hardwiring of the brain. There's just absolutely wonderful research, and anybody who is watching this video, I encourage you to look up an article in the New York Times Magazine that's online by Paul Bloom, B-L-O-O-M, of Yale University, and the article is called The Moral Lives of Babies. And Bloom and his group at Yale, he's a child psychologist, child developmental researcher, they've done this absolutely fabulous research showing how children as young as, I think, 3-6 months of age, they can tease out these moral inferential systems in children. They've just done some brilliant research. I'll describe one experiment. They have a situation where they're puppets, and a puppet is going up a hill, and there's a helper puppet that helps it up the hill. There's also a hinderer puppet that, as the one is going up the hill, will push it down. And they can show, when the children are given a choice, that the children will orient towards the helper puppet. And as Bloom points out, these children are making a social distinction about an agent that they've had no direct harm or help. They're making a social judgment about an agent, and really a moral inference that this helper is good, the hinderer is bad. They go further and they show that when the hinderer puppet is punished, the infant will orient towards the punisher. So they can make a complicated moral decision, a moral inferential decision, as early as 6 months of age. And the Jesuit priest has not yet had time to indoctrinate. And well, it's marvelous. It's marvelous research, and I encourage people to pull up that article. It's just a wonderful article.
I will put a link to that in the video when it's posted.